Joining me from New York is Rahul Manchanda, an immigration lawyer. Rahul, the Trump administration insists this travel ban is about keeping Americans safe. Is it?
Well, it's a great question. I think this issue is extremely emotional, but the Supreme Court decision was surprisingly reasonable. When I read it, actually, they were talking about offering these nations, and remember, there's only 5. There was actually 8 that they took off the list pretty recently, but they offered these nations a vetting process or to share information and gave them 50 days to do so, and they didn't comply. So it's a little strange. Chad got off the list. I think Somalia got off the list. So, it was pared down quite a bit. Obviously, it was born out of a lot of emotionalism. A lot of nasty things were said in the press, preceding this. So it was a very emotionally charged issue. But, there's 50 Muslim nations, and 5 of them have been affected. And I think a lot of this has to do with those countries, the foreign policy relationship that's breaking down with the United States. Now, also, I think Venezuela is on the list as well. So I don't know if it's, I don't know if we can categorize it as a, quote, Muslim ban.
Well, Rahul, Somalia is actually on the list. It's Iran, North Korea, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Venezuela. So if I'm an Iranian, which I am, but let's say I wasn't an American citizen, and I was trying to come to this country, and I did not have a green card, or I did have a green card, do you know what kind of restrictions, whether you're Syrian or Iranian or Libyan, what kind of restrictions would those people be facing now?
Well, from my reading of the statute, green card holders are actually exempt from this. And Iraq was, I think, previously on the list, but Iraq was pulled off. It was all about sharing information. A lot of the problems that we're seeing right now that they were looking at were that some of these countries they had pockets and skirmishes and some groups that they weren't vetting properly, and there may have been some kind of, some organizations that may or may not have been, shared with the United States. So it was a little gray. And I think that this came from Homeland Security. It came from the State Department recommendations about these certain nations. But, the initial, charge was sort of a gangbusters, included a lot more countries. And I think the Supreme Court really kind of broke it down a lot today. So it's not an emotional issue. The Supreme Court had a very reasoned decision, it seemed, when I read it. And I was actually surprised by how reasonable it was.
But it was also a very close decision, 5-4. Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ruth Bader Ginsburg clearly disagreed with the conservatives on the court, issuing a very strong statement. And I'll read you a part of that statement. They go on to say the United States of America is a nation built upon the promise of religious liberty. Our founders honored that core promise by embedding the principle of religious neutrality in the First Amendment. The court's decision today fails to safeguard that fundamental principle. It leaves undisturbed a policy first advertised openly and unequivocally as a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States, because the policy now masquerades behind a facade of national security concerns. Wow.
Yep. A heck of an indictment on that, and we're not surprised by Sotomayor's, reasoning on that. But the reality is that, you have a country like Venezuela in that list, though. So, and also other countries that were on the list.
But there's also a country like Saudi Arabia. Why isn't Saudi Arabia on that list? Let's not forget 15 of the 19 hijackers that attacked this country were from Saudi Arabia.
Exactly, and that may be politics at play, money at play here, clearly. There's a lot of issues here, that go into the mix. But, what I was surprised by was the reasoning of the court. I mean, it made a lot of sense. They gave these countries an opportunity also to get off the list, and they just didn't do it. That's one of the issues, that maybe needs to be investigated further. What were the questions? What were the vetting requirements? What did they ask them to share? Maybe some of those, questions and some of the information they were asking for were untenable. That's also something that has to be investigated. But, it is a result.
Rahul, do you believe the Supreme Court decision gives President Trump more leverage in his attempts to control the border, his zero-tolerance policy at the Mexico border?
Well, I think that the agreement today, the decision today was actually born out of the 1952 immigration decision that called for communist prevention, prevention of communist infiltration in the United States. So, he had the INA on his side. But in terms of the Mexican issue and separating the children from families, if that's what you're referring to, no, it doesn't support that whatsoever. And I think this executive action did, remedy that to some extent. But now the question is, are they going to be able to repatriate these children back to their parents, which I think is going to be a very big, daunting task. People aren't really talking about that. But, that's a very, very daunting task. So, but in terms of the border control,
just whether it gives the president more leverage is what I was asking.
Well, it's certainly, to the Trump administration, this decision today is a victory. They're looking at it as a victory. So it can only bolster their position when it comes to these issues. But I'm not so sure it relates. It's apples and oranges. It's a completely different matter. And I don't really think that it's going to come up in the context of the Mexican border issue.
All right, we'll leave it there. Rahul Manchanda, thank you so much.